Has served the World Evangelical Alliance as Associate Secretary General for Theological Concerns and as Chair of the Theological Commission. He's also the President of the International Society for Human Rights and is presiding Bishop of the Communio Messianica. Welcome and thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here in Prague. I got to hear about the Anglo-American University many years ago from my close friend Thomas K. Johnson, who was a professor of philosophy here. And at that time, because he's an American, I thought the Anglo-American University is some Americans studying in Prague. But I got to know better. And I congratulate you all for the topic you have, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you said, even so I'm from the west of Germany. Sometimes I have to speak at human rights conferences, and it's very boring, because everybody says it's in favor of human rights, and in the end you think, well, why did we meet? And your contribution shows that there is a deep, deep need to discuss the whole topic anew in our present age, because, let me frame it this way, we have states, we have ideological groups who have taken captive of human rights, because this seems to be the moral unity of the world. They have taken captive, and through those nice words and ideas, try to press their ideas on everybody else. And to be frank, when I compare myself being in school many decades ago and today, I had much more freedom when I was in school to say what I think than I have today. Today I'm tiptoeing through society, having to exaggerate a little bit every sentence I say, have a lawyer with me who does not mainly compare this to what is legally allowed, but what the media allow me to say. But this is only I will give my speech now. I have a topic where the first moment you might think, okay, he's a Christian philosopher, he is a religious person himself, so he thinks about this question whether human rights are above worldviews, above religions. But I can tell you, this is a very, very practical problem. To give you two examples, I accompanied Pope Francis to Abu Dhabi, and you know that the question of human rights, equality of women and men, etc. was a hot topic there. And I can tell you, in the middle of this, you wonder, is this a religious topic? Is this a political topic? Is this an academic topic? Is it just diplomacy to get some statements a little opening? And of course, the pure fact that you can have a Christian worship service with nearly 200,000 people in itself changes things anyway. But what I realize is that underlying there is a huge deficit concerning the question of authority of human rights. Where does the authority of human rights come from, and especially where does the authority of human rights come from if you come from a totally different worldview or religion? And of course, human rights only work if they are there for you and me, even if we come from two different worlds. But how can we both have authority for this if we come from different worlds, which includes that the arguments we use to back human rights might be totally different, might be even opposite. Take another example. I'm very glad that Norwich University is here, because recently I had to open a conference in our German Minister of Defense on the ethics or morals within an army. Under the protest of many of my fellow bishops, I said that a democratic and non-corrupt, I know what I say, but a non-corrupt police and military is the largest human rights organization in the world. And I saw from the very reaction how distorted meanwhile the discussion is. Because if somebody, don't misunderstand, democratic, non-corrupt, I know what's going on in the world, but if you have people who save your life from other people who want to kill you, if this is not defending human rights, what then is defending human rights? Yeah? After all, human life itself is the most important human right we have. If we are dead, we don't need any human rights any longer. And it was very interesting in this debate that, in my perspective, about 40 to 50% of the members of our army, the soldiers and officers, come from a non-religious background. And the interesting thing is, when speaking, I had the impression that they understand the Christian view of human rights much better than many of the secular media that afterwards reported on it, and gave the impression that if what I say is out of the world. So it's really a very practical discussion. What is the problem? Human rights, and let me first of all talk about the human rights of the first and second generation, you mentioned it already, only work if they are above the state, if they are above any institution of power. If the institutions of power define whether you have human rights or not, if the Czech Parliament would have to vote on the human rights for 2019 and then 2020 every year, if this would be part of the game between the political parties, we all would not be very happy. And the idea is that human rights is nothing that is voted in by the state, but they exist prior to the state. I mean, we all know the state has to put it into actual legal proceedings, no question. Yeah? But nevertheless, it is not something we have to beg for, and we do not vote for parties that give us human rights and others don't give it to them. Human rights are theirs. To a certain extent, they morally define what the state is for, to preserve our life, our dignity, our well-being, etc. But if they are above everything and above every power structure, this includes that they are also above every economic structure, but also every religious and worldview structure. So we take it for a given. What happens, I'm heavily involved in this, even so I'm a Protestant, what happens in the Vatican at the moment with the misuse of minors. Even if the Catholic Church would have had a law that would allow this, we would not care. So that we would say it's a very evil violation of the human rights of those minors, and we do not really care who does it and whether he might have an excuse or not. It is above the Catholic Church, and that means above the largest organization that exists in this world. It judges what they are doing. And only then it makes sense. We would have problems if the Catholic Church would propose human rights, they are in favor of it, but always when it becomes a problem for them, make certain exceptions. But the same is of course true for non-religious ideological institutions. I'm not going to repeat everything you said about the Czech Republic, but after all, the different forms of communism showed the same. We were convinced that the idea of human rights, that human dignity, is above all those institutions, whether they agree to it or not. But now the problem is, it is those very institutions we talk about that we need for a discussion of the authority of the human rights. It's easy to say the Catholic Church has to follow, has to be judged by human rights. But it makes a big difference whether the Catholic Church itself is for human rights or not. The pure fact that in the Second Vatican Council, the Catholic Church itself switched its position in relation to whom human rights and religious freedom had a far-reaching effect. And not mainly because they said, okay, there's no chance we lost, let them have their human rights. But the actual change is they made human rights and the idea of human rights part of the DNA of theology. You no longer can think about Christian theology without talking about human dignity and without talking about human rights being a central part of Christian ethics. And that makes a difference. I do not say that because of the Second Vatican Council, automatically, because the Pope told them so, Catholic states became democracies. But it is a fact that when this was decided, the vast majority of Catholic countries still were not functioning Catholic democracies, and 30 years later they were. To be frank, in Germany we had Catholics that were more Catholic than the Vatican long before, in 1949, when our constitution was written. We owe it very much to Catholic politicians who were far ahead of their own church, who at that time already know that Christian ethics includes the human rights. And it took a bit longer until the theologians understood it too in Rome and elsewhere. So, my first proposition is that we have to clearly make a difference. We need a Christian view of human rights. We need a Muslim authorization of human rights. We need a secular one, and there will be different ones. We need Immanuel Kant as much as Thomas Aquinas. But it's a difference between the argument, the Christian argument for human rights, and the church as an institution. For example, in the discussion of the Russian Orthodox Church, you can see they don't distinguish the two. They insist that Christianity is the truth, and therefore human rights cannot be a part of the truth. I even would agree. I only would say, and human rights are part of this truth. But they do not distinguish it from the institution of the church itself. The law and the institution are always two different things. To say our truth has to be involved in the discussion when we discuss human rights, okay. But the result is not that I make an exception for myself, that the institution of the church is above those truths. But that the church is part of the international discussion about the authority of the human rights, what the human rights are, and without referring to any theologian, he already made it very clear, there's a lot to discuss, and there's a lot of things the churches should bring up and say, wait a minute, the discussion is not at the end yet. But how can this work if a Catholic has a Catholic argument for human rights? And a friend of Immanuel Kant has a way of Immanuel Kant, and the two do not fit. And the Buddhist goes a totally different way about non-violence in creation and ends up with human rights. And. How can this work together? We have a problem. The argument in favor of human rights that needs to combine us all is more or less the secular argument. And this argument mainly comes from more or less non-religious philosophers. All religious philosophers I know those arguments, can work with those arguments, and rather like people to follow those arguments and are in favor of human rights, than to tell them you need to convert to, I don't know, X or that, otherwise you never will understand human rights. But the experience is that those very academic, very complicated philosophical ideas rarely get people on the street. It often is stuck in academic discussions. It's hard for normal people to understand the discussions, and it does not get people going. We need the human rights discourse and the discussion about the human rights at the very place where people get enthusiastic about society and politics. And this is the problem. Active Christian will not look to Immanuel Kant. He will not necessarily disagree with his arguments. He will also not necessarily disagree with the golden rules, but his enthusiasm comes. If his own church tells him, this is the number one thing we have to do in this world to assure that we all live in dignity. As long as Muslim theologians tell people that the human rights are under the Sharia, obviously, rarely Muslims will get enthusiastic about doing something about human rights. The moment, and those theologians and philosopher thinkers are there in the Muslim world, in the moment they are in favor and want to work for human rights, they can activate Muslims to work on behalf of human rights, which I never can activate, because my arguments for it do not work with them. If this is the case, then I can go back, we heard it already, to the Declaration of Independence. All human beings are created equal. This is something where the Christians and Muslims could go together and say, okay, that's a base for us to agree on human rights. What about the people who do not believe that anything was created? How do we get them in? My second proposal is we first of all need to understand the mass of the people that are in favor of human rights. And the mass developments in favor of human rights were not driven by those discussions, whether Christian or Muslim or secular or whatever, but by mass violations of human rights. We would not have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 if my nation would not have killed 6 million Jews. To see that there seems to be no border for violations of human rights, that if you let this go, in the end humankind might kill itself until the last man or the last woman standing, I don't know, yeah? That this can go so far and so deep that we kill whole groups of people in numbers, where one 10 years ago would have said, it's impossible. I know those writings in Germany when people would say, oh, let Hitler say what he wants. It's impossible to kill a large proportion of a nation, including the richest people in the country. Nowadays we know you can. You just need to kill them. And a billionaire that is citizen of a country and has a lot of, if you just kill him, he's dead. His money doesn't help. And we know that evil things are possible where people still in the 1930s would have said, that's impossible, technically or morally, and now we know it is possible. So it is this mass violation. When in Biafra in Africa, hundreds of thousands of people, including children, died because they had no water. And the water was about 100 kilometers away, but nobody felt responsible to bring it there. Today, that would be the United Nations that would have the task to bring it there. And this kind of the United Nations is functioning well. This is why we never had a second Biafra. I'm not talking about the political part of the United Nations, but this works well. 100 kilometers, nobody felt responsible. What was the result? 5 years later, we had the human right to drinking water. Yeah? Not because big philosophers found out that water is something very special. The pure fact to see how easy it is to violate this human right by just not providing water, by nobody feeling responsible. Yeah? That pushed for this argument. But this does not mean that we, as soon as we get into the middle of those discussions, do not need an in-house, deep and controversial discussion about the authority of human rights and where they come from, because the question where they come from decides a very central question. Which of the many, many human rights we have on the market, and I can tell the number is growing every year. Every year people claim this is a human right, this is a human right. Which of those are really original human rights we have to defend? Programs, party programs, wrapped into paper that has human rights on it. If you want to discuss this, you have to go back to the question, where do human rights come from? And there I urge us, this is the third proposition, human rights only work when they are above any institution, including the institutions that produce arguments for human rights, which would be the churches in Christianity, the philosophers at universities, and the secular, or wherever else. We should accept the complementarity. I'm deeply convinced that the original human rights version is a marriage out of a long Christian tradition about human dignity, and even the word human dignity obviously comes from Christian theology, with the best of secular thinking. I already mentioned Immanuel Kant. I don't want to get into this discussion. I don't want to say he is the best. But, I mean, yeah, there is this, and the two marriage. And in Germany that meant that in 1949, religious forces, the churches, the people that went into politics because they were Christians, and those who were secular people and either had no interest in religion or had a specific worldview, specific secular, they work together towards the good of society. Which means it's a secular state that does not identify with a religion, which an extreme openness that religion is in the public market and is in the middle of the discussion. We have worked well with it. We now have a big discussion to solve with, so to speak, third group that comes in, which is our Muslim friends that live in large numbers in Germany. But that was a project that only worked because both sides accepted that there are totally different arguments to get to human rights. And that the secular people cannot just claim the Christian view of human rights is idiotic. And after all, in large numbers, the secular people still use terms that originally come from the history of theology. And often they have not been replaced. While the Christians, by their very nature, cannot claim, if you do not have a Christian argument for human rights, you have no argument. Because the Christian idea is that this is so because the world is created like this. And if the world is created like this, everybody, not only Christians, everybody that is willing to think can find about it. It is not a mystery, but it's very obvious. Let's take the human rights to drinking water. Once you formulate it, it is totally obvious. Yeah? It's easy, perhaps even easier for Christians to talk about drinking water. And if you take the Old and the New Testament and the importance of living water, you have an easy access to it. But if this is true, every other person of another religion, but also people who do not believe in any higher being, easily can find about it. And I urge us, this is my third proposition, that we do not use this to speak against each other, but we use it in complementarity and concentrate and taking this historic roots of our ideas for human rights to discuss what is really needed. And this is what my friend has been speaking about. Huge changes going on, of which I said a little difference, that today more or less everything is wrapped in human rights language, and we have to go back and find out what is really human rights and what is just the personal interest or the interest of certain groups. Yeah? I mean, if you want to sell a new product as a bank, yeah, the most important thing is you have to find out how can you make this into a human rights project. Your interest still is just to gain income. Yeah? But just to say, I want to gain income, doesn't sound as good as to find out this is a special product to the poor and so and so. Yeah? Where you would say, if you really mean it, well, you give them for them for free. That's in the Old Testament already. If if you give a loan, give it for free. Yeah? And I think we should come together, accept that there are different roads to human rights, be self-aware that we believe most in our own road that follows our own worldview, but sit down again, put those together, and start to distinguish between the bright and superb original idea of human rights on the one side and the many, many fakes that are on the market that use the term, but in reality are just party politics. Thank you very much.